This video is an expansion of a quick video I did for Patreon recently. In the previous video, I only mentioned the color wheel, but here I wanted to talk about it more in depth because I think that issues of color and value are intertwined. Value actually comes before color, although color is very important and we need to look at it closely in order to understand value. The color wheel is basically a way of understanding colors. In the center of the color wheel, we have pie-shaped pieces that are the hues or colors, and those consist of the primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and then the secondary colors, orange, green, and purple, which you get from mixing primary colors. If you mix a primary color with the secondary color next to it, you get the 6 tertiary colors. The band around the hues represents the tints, and those are the colors you get if you add white to any one of the hues. And then the furthest band out to the edge is the shade of a color, and that's what you get if you add black. And then there's another band in between the tints and the shades, which is called the tone band, and those are the colors you get if you add gray to your primary, secondary, or tertiary hue. So to understand issues of value, we want to turn the color wheel black and white. Once we look at the color wheel this way, we can see what's really going on in terms of the values around the color wheel and the different bands. Here I show you what happens if I take a little square from the tone of purple and I've marked it with a little band of aqua so that you can tell where it is when I place them on the color wheel. And what I'm going to do is move these around in this crude screen capture to show you how closely they match up to other parts of the color wheel once you take into account the tints and the tones and the shades. It doesn't match exactly because there are infinite combinations of colors that you can come up with, but this just shows you how close this color is in value to various other places on the wheel. And so if I turn it back into color, you can see if I took these 6 different colors and made a very nice quilt with beautiful stitching and a beautiful design or pattern, I could hang it on the wall and step back and not be able to see my design at all, because everything in terms of value is practically the same. And that's why when you want to put a tree against a sky, you don't want your tree to be, in terms of value, the same as your whole sky. This is why, while both of these images work and could be lovely close up and be very beautiful quilts, the one on the left is the one that would be recognizable across somebody's great room or down a hallway, and it's the one that pulls us forward. And of course, a lot of this is, we can talk about these things and try to quantify all of this, but the truth is, you can't really quantify art. There are qualities and things that happen when you're making a piece of fiber art that, I'm just going to say it, it's just some magic happens. And sometimes something we really thought would be awful and wouldn't work is our favorite part of a quilt. And so we talk about this in case we're struggling with having our shapes be recognizable as what we wanted them to look like. But it's just a way to try to get to where you're trying to go. It's, if something works, do it. The thing about value is that it's relative. I have 17 fabrics here. Value is not the color of the fabric, but the depth or richness of the color. And so if I make these in color, you can see that, and then I'll go back to the black and white, they look a lot different than you think they do in terms of what's actually the darkest. And I think these are in a pretty good order. But what I want you to understand is that, first of all, it's a judgment call. Clearly this has a different value than this or this, But between these three, what order do they go in? I actually put the blue one over here first in my first photo that I just took with my cell phone and then turned to black and white, and then I moved it back. So all of it is complicated by the fact that various things can obscure how we perceive, because this is all about our perception. It's not a hard science. That's why it's a judgment call in a lot of cases. But the amount of metallic on the print can make a difference and make it read different whether or not light is glinting off of that surface, and pattern can have an influence, and the lights and darks in the pattern can have an influence on how we perceive it. There's one color that causes enough trouble that I thought it was worth a special mention, and that's the red family of color. Because they're intense and rich and also bright, the reds can sometimes be hard to read because they don't necessarily have the kind of impact in our piece that we expect. And so sometimes I try to play with that. And in fact, with my wallflowers, where I would have normally used a lighter fabric, I use red, hoping that my flowers will still show because they're so bright. And we're going to take a look at that now and see how that works with the recent project that we did that was 9 videos, 7 on the project and 2 on stitch patterns that could be used for the project. So here's a graphic representation of my project, which my daughter made for me. And you can see that I started out trying to make a background that was mid-tone fabrics that would be able to blend fairly well, and then have the flowers and the leaves show on top. And if I had made some of my fabrics really, really light in value, I would have had a predominantly striped looking background. And so here you can see what my flowers would have looked like on top of that. And then I did want to mention that in making my quilt with the mid-tone background, the easy solution that I really considered doing was doing super light flowers. But I wanted to do red maroon flowers, and so that's what I did. So now let's see if we can pull all this together and make some sense of it in terms of how we do our art quilt. I needed 7 fabrics to make this piece, and I covered this in my last 9 videos, but to do my background I wanted 3 fabrics, and I wanted those fabrics to be different enough that up close you could really see the different fabrics, and I wanted to be able to have the stitching show when you look up close. But from a distance I wanted all of this to sort of blend together and the flowers and the leaves to be able to kind of pop off. And then to do my flowers, which I wanted to be distinct, I picked a red and maroon kind of palette, and I've actually got some pretty hot pink in some of this fabric here. And then I picked a third fabric, it's a dark cranberry fabric, and then for my flower center I picked a yellow with a little firefly pattern on it, I think. And then I needed one more fabric for the leaves, and I picked this very bright, by comparison, chartreuse fabric that had actually sort of a bamboo pattern on it, but you don't really see it here. And so in this way I take these different fabrics and I try to make it so that my flower is differentiated from my background and my leaves are obvious from a distance, and I'm relying on the color red to help you recognize what's going on. There are many different ways to see what we're talking about here. Look for one that's quick and easy for you to do. If I go to edit, and this is an iPhone, and I push these 3 little circles here, there are different options. I think the mono is fine, and and then you can go back to the original. The other tools that work are Photocopies, because that turns it black and white, works. Looking at something and holding it up in a mirror helps a lot to see what you're really dealing with. You can use a red piece of plastic, or a ruby beholder is a commercial thing that you can buy to use. You can get a reducing glass that is the opposite of a magnifying glass, and that can be helpful too. One of the quickest methods I know of is to just stand far away or to reduce the image on a computer or camera screen. Also, I'm going to be putting out a video on the viewer projects pretty soon, and right before that comes out I'll do the drawing, and there are 3 prizes again: the flower postcard, the flower coaster that I made in those videos, and then also one of my mitt sets and a matching pot holder, which if you're drawn for that prize, when I contact you, we'll do it back and forth and you can pick your choices from my existing inventory.